Here are the top stories for today, October 30, 2020. UAE-based Gulf News highlights President Duterte's high approval rating in the country. Malacanang clarifies that allies are not exempted from corruption. With the U.S. polls less than a week away, what is at stake for the Philippines? And let us take a look at the family's grave branding tradition in Albay. Good day, I'm William Theo. Welcome to the PNA Newsroom. Typhoon Rolly continues to intensify while moving westward over the Philippine Sea. According to Pag-asa, tropical cyclone wind signals number 3 and 4 may be raised in some parts of the country in the coming days.
Patuloy pa rin lumalakas itong bagyo bago ito lumapit ng ating kalupaan. So bukas ng umaga, inaasahan ito ay nasa layo ng 815 km silangan ng Infanta, Quezon. Pagdating naman ng Sunday morning, ito naman ay nasa 210 km kasi may silangan ng Daet, Camarines Norte. So makikita natin, from Saturday to Sunday, ito ay susubsob at pagdating naman ng Monday morning, ito ay nasa 70 kilometers west of Dagupan City sa may Pangasinan. So, base dito sa ating forecast track, so makikita natin na babaybay ng kalupaan itong si Rolly ng Linggo hanggang Lunes. Inaasahan pa natin na posible tayo magtaas ng tropical cyclone wind signal number 3 or 4 as it continues to intensify prior to landfall. Ibig sabihin, habang nasa tubig, ito ay nagpapalakas at malaki ang chance na magtaas tayo ng signal number 3 at signal number 4.
President Rodrigo Duterte's high trust and approval ratings reflect his popularity among Filipinos and other countries. According to UAE-based Gulf News, President Duterte's 91% in the recent Pulse Asia survey, perhaps the highest for any leader in the world. It mentions Russian President Vladimir Putin's approval rating of 60% in July 2020. According to the paper, the result of the survey reflects the resilience of a generation of leaders seen as populists. Such leaders include Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro. Gulf News said Duterte's Build, Build, Build program has contributed to his popularity since the program was seen as an antidote to years of neglect of infrastructure. Malacanang maintains President Rodrigo Duterte's allies are not exempted from investigations being conducted by the Mega Task Force. Senator Panfilo Lacson earlier alleged that the investigation started on the wrong foot as the president seemed to have already shielded Health Secretary Francisco Duque III and Public Works Secretary Mark Villar. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said the president's statements absolving both Duque and Villar do not mean that they will be excluded from the all-encompassing investigations.
Naghahanap lang po ng ebidensya ang Pangulo. Kahit sino naman po, kahit gaano kalapit sa kanya, kahit gaano ang pagpuli niya sa nakaraan, kung meron naman pong ebidensya na katawilian, ay parurusahan ng ating presidente. Nakita po natin yan dito sa karanasan ni General Morales ng PhilHealth, bagamat buo ang tiwala ni Presidente kay General Morales, nang nagkaroon naman po ng ebidensya ang task force sa PhilHealth at ibang sangay ng gobyerno, hindi naman po naging hadlang ang Presidente para imbestigahan at nitisin si General Morales.
Meanwhile, Roque also expressed full support on the decision of Justice Secretary Menardo Guevara, who heads the Mega Task Force, to start investigating in among the most notorious agencies, namely the Bureau of Customs or BOC, Bureau of Internal Revenue or BIR, Land Registration Authority or LRA, and the Department of Public Works and Highways or DPWH.
Fully supported po natin yan. Siguro naman po ang rason ay obvious. Traditionally po, talagang malawakan at systemic ang korupsyon sa mga ahensyang ito.
Only the signature of President Duterte is needed to finalize the proposed price cap of COVID-19 swab tests. According to presidential spokesperson Harry Roque, some private laboratories charge expensive fees for COVID-19 tests when it would only cost about 1,500 to 2,000 pesos if done by private-led Project ARC. He said making COVID-19 tests more affordable would improve the government's efforts to test, trace, treat more Filipinos.
I cannot preempt the decision of the President. But what I can assure you is, natapos na po yung responsibilidad ng TWG ng DOH, tapos na rin po ang paperwork sa Office of the Executive Secretary, at ngayon po ay nag-aantay na lang ng pirma ng ating Presidente. From all indications, mukha naman pong magkakaroon ng price cap.
Cash assistance under the Bayanihan to Recover as One Act, or Bayanihan 2, will be released to the affected local and overseas workers by next week. Under Bayanihan 2, the Department of Labor and Employment, or DOLE, would get 13 billion pesos to finance these programs to help the formal, informal employees and overseas Filipino workers who were displaced due to the pandemic. Cash assistance would be given in the form of programs such as Tupad Emergency Employment or one-time financial assistance through CAMP and AKAP. CAMP provides a one-time cash subsidy of 5,000 pesos to informal sector workers. Tupad beneficiaries were given emergency employment and were paid the minimum wage prevailing in their respective areas. Meanwhile, cash assistance to OFWs under AKAP is at 10,000 pesos. House Speaker Lord Alan Velasco is supporting the swift passage of the bill creating the Department of Overseas Filipino Workers. Velasco said President Duterte's statement that he will certify as urgent the measure for the creation of the Department of OFWs is very timely in order to address the concerns of migrant workers, especially at this time of pandemic. Citing data from the Department of Labor and Employment, Velasco said that close to 500,000 OFWs have been displaced by the pandemic, about 15,000 are scheduled for repatriation, and over 70,000 remain stranded across the globe as of October. The House of Representatives has approved on third and final reading its own version of the measure. Once the Senate passes its own version, Velasco said the House will act on it in swift fashion so that it can be signed into law. Still to come, Malacanang respects Senate probe on influx of Chinese workers. And what is at stake for the country in the upcoming U.S. polls? More on this when the PNA Newsroom continues.
Alamin kung paano ang tamang pagsusuot ng surgical mask. Una, hawakan ang mask sa strap at siguruhing natatakpan nito ang inyong bibig at ilong. Tandaan, ang may kulay na bahagi ng mask ang dapat nasa labas. Ito lamang ang tamang paraan ng pagsuot nito. Ihulma ang nose piece o maliit na metallic strip ayon sa hugis ng inyong ilong. Iwasan ang paghawak sa inyong ilong at bibig. Kung marumi na ang mask, hubarin ito gamit ang strap at itapon ito sa isang basurahan. Siguruhin ang maayos na paghuhugas ng kamay gamit ang sabon at tubig. Ang surgical mask ay dapat gamitin ng mga pasyenteng may sakit sa baga o mga taong mayroong ubo, sipon at lagnat, mga nag-aalaga sa mga may sakit, at mga healthcare at frontline workers. Maaari ring magsuot nito kung kayo ay pupunta sa matataong lugar. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to! Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
You're still watching the PNA Newsroom. President Rodrigo Duterte welcomes the call for a Senate inquiry into the national security implications of the influx of foreign national retirees and some 4 million Chinese nationals into the country since 2017. Senator Francis Kiko Pangilinan earlier expressed concern over a possible orchestrated soft invasion of these foreign nationals. Pangilinan said some senators particularly questioned the high proportion of Chinese workers on bridge construction projects in Metro Manila. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said President Duterte always leaves it to the discretion of the legislative to investigate any government program or project. Roque earlier stressed that the two China-funded bridge projects are 100% donations from the Chinese government. For his part, Public Works Secretary Mark Villar clarifies that the employment of foreign workers is not necessarily a condition for the approval of official development assistance from foreign countries. Public Works Undersecretary Emil Sadain meanwhile said 31% of the workers for the Estrella-Pantaleon Bridge are Chinese, while 69% are Filipino. The presidential race in the United States between President Donald Trump and former Vice President Joseph Biden is moving into its final stretch. With the polls less than a week away, political experts weigh in on its possible outcome and what is at stake for the Philippines. According to Professor Romel Banlawi, a Trump re-election would bring a continuation to the U.S.-China rivalry, which could pressure the Philippines to take sides. If Biden wins, Banlawi, damaging action against China would be reversed as Biden has sought to promote the interstate cooperation, open trade, and multilateralism. For his part, political analyst Ramon Casipla said Washington is likely to focus on the Asia-Pacific, including the Philippines, which would be the center of exposure in the international arena. He said the Philippines must be ready to handle the new world that is coming, which means it has to be alert on its feet in dealing with coming relations rather than rely solely on its old ties. Casiple said that after the U.S. elections, the country will try to come back and implement new series of policies based on its own interest. A local government resettlement program is underway for the relocation of informal settlers all over the country. Members of the House Committee on Housing and Urban Development approved the measure, which is a consolidation of several proposed laws. This also includes House Bill 4869, authored by Cagayan de Oro Representative Rufus Rodriguez. Under the said measure, informal settler families and LGUs would be intensively involved in the formulation of a resettlement plan for homeless citizens. The measure also assures basic services and livelihood for relocated families. The Department of Social Welfare and Development, or DSWD, said it will craft a measure to ensure that seniors and persons with disabilities can still get their discount privileges even in online transactions. DSWD Secretary Rolando Joselito Bautista said the agency has partnered with the Department of Trade and Industry to craft a policy that will check the rules for online purchasing of senior citizens and PWDs. Senior citizens and PWDs are entitled under the law to at least a 20% discount and exemption from the value-added tax on goods and services. This also applies to transportation, recreation centers, and medical services. Bautista said the DSWD looks over the welfare of vulnerable sectors and engage with other offices and implementing agencies to make sure that these are being implemented. The National Privacy Commission, or NPC, warns businesses and other establishments from using the contact tracing data collected from the public for purposes other than contact tracing. The NPC said some workplaces and businesses have allegedly been using personal information taken from contact tracing data for marketing, profiling customers, and other purposes. The agency laid out guidelines for workplaces and establishments for the processing of personal data as part of its COVID-19 response. When collecting personal data for purposes of COVID-19 prevention and control, it is said establishments shall limit its collection to only those required. They must provide a privacy notice, ensure data quality and accuracy through authorized personnel, and prohibit repurposing of data for other purposes. They must also remind employees and third-party personnel that using private data is punishable under the Data Privacy Act of 2012. In our business news, oil refinery players in the Philippines are likely to come back as demand will pick up once economic pressure due to the COVID-19 pandemic eases. JUI IQI Global Chief Economist Shan Said said they expect prices to consolidate in 2021, during which they would be trading between $50 and $65 per barrel. He added that the situation of the Philippine players in the oil and gas industry is not different from global players, as coal industry is going through challenging times due to depressed prices. Said said it is crucial for the government to implement reforms that will bring back confidence among investors and maintain stability in the economy. He mentioned that mergers and acquisitions will be a key in bringing back those businesses that shut down amid the pandemic. Up next, activist mom urges Liza Soberano and Catriona Gray to protect the youth. And let us take a look at the family's grave branding tradition in Albay. The PNA Newsroom returns after these reminders.
Alamin ang tamang paraan ng pag-ubo upang mapigilan ang paglaganap ng coronavirus disease 2019. Ugaliing magdala ng panyo o tissue. Kung uubo o babahing, takpan ang buong ilong at bibig gamit ang panyo o tissue. Kung walang dalang panyo o tissue, maaaring gamitin ang braso na pantakip. Kung nakararamdam na kailangan umubo o bumahing, agad na dumistansya sa mga tao sa paligid. Huwag dumura kung saan-saan, gumamit ng tissue at itapon sa basurahan. Ugaliin ang paghuhugas ng kamay at paggamit ng alcohol o hand sanitizer upang mamatay ang mikrobyo. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to! Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
A mother whose daughter was recruited and taken away from her by a leftist group wrote an open letter to actress Liza Soberano and Miss Universe 2018 Catriona Gray. In her Facebook post on October 25, Relisa Lucena said, while she respects Soberano and Gray's advocacy to speak up about women and children's rights, they also have an obligation to lead the youth to the right path. She said her family was a victim of the CPP, NPA, NDF, and their front organizations. Lucena told Soberano and Gray about her daughter Alicia Jasper, or AJ, who was recruited by leftists when she was only 16 years old. She said she hoped for a good future for her daughter and has sacrificed a lot to get her back. Lucena said it is also the obligation of military officials and the rest of uniformed personnel to assure the safety of Filipinos and inform them of false advocacies and destructive organizations. Agusan del Norte's provincial government broke ground on Thursday, a housing site for former combatants of the Communist New People's Army. Governor Dale Corvera, Agusan del Norte Congresswoman Maria Angelica Amante Matba, and Mayor Judy Amante led the groundbreaking ceremony of the 1.4-hectare housing site in Barangay del Pilar, Cabadbaran City. Butuan City Councilor Ryan Kulima, who represented the donor San Roque Metals, estimated that 100 families of former rebels would benefit from the housing project. Brigadier General Maurito Licodine, commander of the Army's 402nd Infantry Brigade, meanwhile lauded the National Housing Authority for giving priority to the housing needs of the former rebels. Military troops welcome back to the government fold 9 Islamic State-inspired rebels who surrendered along with their weapons in Maguindanao. More on this and other news from the provinces from Marita Muahe.
A new batch of 9 combatants of the Islamic State-inspired Bangsamoro Islamic Freedom Fighters surrendered to military authorities in Maguindanao. The rebels yielded to the Army's 6th Infantry Division along with their firearms after their former comrades convinced them to avail of the government's program for surrendering rebels. Last week, 9 other BIFF combatants also yielded to the 6th ID after realizing that they were fighting for a futile cause. The Army has vowed to continue welcoming back BIFF surrenderers with the help of the LGUs in the province. In Basilan, an Abu Sayyaf group bandit was killed following a clash with government troops. The Western Mindanao Command identified the slain bandit as Botak Bero, a follower of Furuji Indama, the Basilan-based ASG leader. Bero was intercepted along with two of his comrades Thursday afternoon in Barangay Felang, Ungkaya, Pucan. Soldiers are scouring the area to arrest his remaining companions. Meanwhile, some 150 former rebels and mass supporters of the Communist New People's Army joined the three-day peace-building seminar in Montevista, Davao de Oro from October 26 to 28. The peace-building seminar consisted of anti-radicalization lectures as well as an information drive to raise awareness on the government's financial programs for rebel returnees. The Army's 1,001st Infantry Brigade said the town's 6 barangays were formerly infiltrated by the CPP-NPA-NDF. The Army said the government is willing and determined to support and deliver basic services to the people to finally end a communist armed conflict. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Marita Muaje.
The Department of Social Welfare and Development, or DSWD, says it is ramping up efforts to include more families from indigenous peoples' communities in the Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino program, or 4Ps. DSWD spokesperson Irene Dumlao said among their efforts to uplift the state of living of IPs is their inclusion to the 4Ps. About 663,000 indigenous people families are now 4Ps beneficiaries. This, however, will be updated once the new listahanan, or the National Household Targeting System for Poverty Reduction, is produced in February next year. Under the 4Ps, the IPs are also urged to enroll to their support services intervention, which will help them with their livelihood. DSWD Undersecretary Rene Glenn Pajes said the agency and the National Commission for Indigenous Peoples are closely working together to ensure the delivery of services to the IP sector. The COVID-19 pandemic has failed to stop an almost decade-old family tradition in Owas, Albay during All Souls Day, which they called grave branding. Every year, the Relieve family paints the grave of their late patriarch Jose Riodique Relieve with his favorite brands of apparel, liquor, and food. This year, they had their father's grave painted to look like his favorite chewing gum. Angel Roa Relieve, a nurse in Metro Manila, said their family tradition is their own way of paying tribute to their father. The elder Relieve, a government employee, died in 2011. Angel reminded everyone who plans to visit their departed loved ones after All Saints Day and All Souls Day to stay safe and follow health protocols. Here's another look at today's biggest stories. UAE-based Gulf News highlights President Duterte's high approval rating in the country. Malacanang clarifies that allies are not exempted from corruption. With the U.S. polls less than a week away, what is at stake for the Philippines? And let us take a look at the family's grave branding tradition in Albay. Thank you for watching another episode of the PNA Newsroom. To check more news content, visit our webpage or head onto the Philippine News Agency's Facebook and Twitter accounts. For more stories about the government and how it serves Filipinos, look for these hashtags in all of our social media platforms and websites. We are shown on the pages of the PCOO and its attached agencies. Also watch us on television on PTV4 and IBC 13. And before we close for the long weekend, it is a big tradition in our country to visit our dearly departed loved ones on this holiday of All Saints and All Souls Day. But due to the COVID-19 pandemic, there is a cemetery ban and we will not be able to do that this weekend. But after this, there will always be time after. Remember, it is the thought that counts. What's important is that we have to be safe and help each other heal as one. And that's your daily dose of the biggest stories that you need to know. From the PNA Newsroom, I am William Theo. Good day, stay safe, and a very happy long weekend to everyone.